Do you often feel like you spend so much of your time co regulating your PDA, autistic, or high needs child that nothing else gets done? You end the day exhausted, the laundry is still sitting there, the dishes are still in the sink, the work didn't get done, the house feels chaotic. Your to do list is somehow longer than it was this morning. And despite spending the entire day helping your child, supporting them, accommodating them, co regulating them, and trying to keep everyone afloat, you are left with this awful, dissatisfied feeling. Like somehow you didn't do enough today. Like somehow you're falling behind. Like somehow you're failing at life. Because no matter how much time I spent helping my son feel safe, co regulating him, accommodating him, or supporting him through all the hard moments, my mind did not count those things as success. Instead, it measured my worth by how much I got done or how well my child was doing. Okay, so only then could I feel successful. Only then could I feel enough. I know that feeling well. For years, I thought my problem was that I couldn't get enough done. I thought I needed better time management, more discipline, a better system, or a way to be more productive. But parenting my son eventually forced me to see something much deeper. The problem was never really my to do list. The problem was that I had unknowingly learned to measure my worth, my success, and my enoughness by how much I accomplished. And when life with my son made accomplishment harder and harder, I didn't just feel behind. Okay, I felt like I was failing at life. So, in this episode, I want to talk about why so many parents of PDA, autistic, or high needs kids get trapped in this cycle, why productivity can become a nervous system survival strategy, and how learning to let go of productivity as a measure of worth became one of the most important parts of healing my nervous system and feeling more fulfilled with the life that I have. So let's begin. Hmm. Okay, so I remember the days when my son still went to school because those of you who know me and who have been listening, you know my son has been out of school for many years and has been unschooled. But I remember the days when he was in school, okay? And it was like a whirlwind of schedules and responsibilities and activities and appointments and things to get done. Like when I think back now, I'm like, how did I do that? It was intense, busy days. So for those of you who have kids going to school, you know the game. Okay, so my son would wake up, and he would wake me up every morning because he was an early riser, and then the day would immediately begin. Right, get breakfast ready, get my son dressed, pack lunch, remember the water bottle, get out the door, drop him off, go exercise, come home, shower, work, run errands, pick him up, eat a snack at home again, get to the next program activity, come home, make dinner, clean up, give him a bath, and get him to bed. Whew. Okay. Then get ready to do it all again tomorrow. Okay. So every moment seemed filled. There was always somewhere to be, some schedule to adhere to, something to remember, something to organize, something to accomplish. And for a long time, I thought that this was just what adulthood looked like. I thought that this was what being a good parent looked like. And I thought that this was what being successful looked like. Okay, but looking back now, I can see that something much deeper was happening underneath all of it. Because even when I wasn't actively doing something, my nervous system was. Okay, so the planning never stopped, the scanning never stopped, the mental list never stopped, even on weekends, even during moments that were supposed to feel slow. Okay, I remember sitting on the floor playing Thomas the Trains with my son. He loved Thomas the Trains. And he would completely be immersed in what he was doing, lining up the trains, building tracks, moving the trains, then showing me what he was doing. Happy to simply be there together. Okay. But my mind rarely stayed there for very long, right? Within minutes, my mind would drift, or I would look around the room and I would notice toys or things that needed to be cleaned up. Then I would think about the dishes in the sink, then dinner, then the laundry, then what time it was, then whether my son needed water or a snack because he often struggled to recognize his own thirst and hunger cues, right? So and then the email I hadn't answered or had forgotten, then the work tasks I forgot to do. Okay, then the thing I needed to remember tomorrow. Okay, my mind was always going on what do I need to do? What am I forgetting? What looks dirty that I need to clean up? Okay, so my body was sitting on the floor with him, right? And I'm sure you can relate, but my nervous system was in this stuck on, do mode, right? My nervous system was somewhere else. It was always chasing the next thing, always focused on what needed to happen next. Okay, always trying to stay one step ahead. At the time, I didn't think much of it. I assumed this was normal, right? Like, this is the way I was. I assumed everyone lived this way. But now I can see that I didn't really know how to simply just be, right? Just be present, just be. Okay, I didn't know how to sit in the moment without mentally moving ahead to the next moment. Okay, I didn't know how to rest without thinking about what still needed doing. I didn't really know how to rest. Okay, I didn't know how to feel okay when nothing productive was happening, right? So my son is sitting there playing, and playing is productive, my friends. We all know that now from the neuroscience of play. But, when we're in it, we're like, okay, this is not productive. Our brains haven't been wired to see play as productive, right? Okay. So, and why is that? Because I never learned that growing up, right? A lot of us didn't. Okay. Like I couldn't be because I never had adults, right? My own caregivers sitting and simply being present with me, right? When I was playing or just totally being present, except for like bedtime and reading a book, you know? I don't remember like adults resting without zoning out on TV or having some distraction to keep them occupied. Okay. Like I don't remember that, right? So my mirror neurons, my brain didn't take being in, it only saw doing or like zoning out to relax. Okay. So my parents were too busy working and taking care of responsibilities. They did a really good job of taking care of us and meeting all of our, essential needs, right? But to just sit and be with me, I never learned that, right? My nervous system never just learned that being, right? Resting and being. So what I remember and what I see all my clients, remember is work, responsibilities, accomplishment, productivity, getting things done. You see, I'm just speeding up as I even say that, right? But never just being, which is what our kids need the most. So, okay, without realizing it, my nervous system learned that being a good person, a successful person, meant being productive, useful, responsible, and getting things done, right? And what happened when I did that? I got attention, I got acceptance, acknowledgement, even praise when I was that way, right? So I didn't get attention, acknowledgement, or praise for simply being, right? It's not like my son, my son is sitting there playing Thomas the Trains, and I'm like, wow, I love how you're just being like you're so zoned into the moment. Not like I'm noticing any of that. Okay. So, okay, without realizing it, I built my entire life around this way of doing instead of being. Okay. For years, my ability to feel successful depended on productivity, right? If I got things done, I felt accomplished, capable, successful, and enough. And I love crossing things off a list. Like, don't you love that? Oh, it feels so good. You get that dopamine hit, right? I love the feeling of getting things done. There was a sense of satisfaction that came with it, right? Completion, a sense of relief, a sense that I was doing life correctly. But when I didn't get things done, which was often with my son, I felt stressed, right? I felt behind. I felt frustrated. I felt like I was somehow failing. So I would compare myself to other mothers who seemed to be able to do it all. Okay. The moms who appeared organized, whose homes seemed so put together and clean, who seemed to effortlessly balance parenting, careers, exercise, friendships, meal planning, extracurriculars, and everything else that life demanded, right? So here I was feeling like, well, why can't I do that? What's wrong with me? Why does everything feel so much harder for me? Okay? And meanwhile, I'm comparing myself to parents who have more neurotypical kids, by the way. So at the time, that wasn't a fair comparison, right? But also at the time, I thought that I needed better time management, okay? Like more discipline, better organization, a more efficient system. I didn't realize that something much deeper was driving all of it, okay? Because underneath the productivity was a belief, okay? A belief that I couldn't yet see, a belief that said, if I am productive, I am enough, right? If I am productive, I am successful. If I am productive, I am worthy, and even add to that lovable. Okay. And parenting a high needs child would eventually expose just how much of my self worth had become attached to that belief. So, one of the things I can see clearly now is how often my son tried to pull me back into the present moment. Okay. And I'm sure you have had these experiences, right? So, when my attention drifted away, he seemed to know, right? Sometimes he would come right into my face. Sometimes he would interrupt what I was doing if I was just trying to organize or clean up something while I was there with him. Sometimes he would become totally dysregulated, like all of a sudden. So, looking back now, it's almost as if, and it is actually, that he could feel when I had left the room mentally and emotionally, even though I was still physically sitting beside him, right? Or he could feel my nervous system speeding up into that sympathetic state of flight to, because I was so uncomfortable with being that I needed to do, right? So even though I was sitting physically beside him, I was, not, my nervous system was not present and there. Okay. So there was always this push pull happening inside me. Okay. So part of me wanted to be fully present with him. Part of me wanted to get things done. Part of me knew that he needed connection. Part of me was focused on productivity. Part of me wanted to slow down. Part of me felt anxious when I did slow down. Okay. The more I spent time supporting him, the more frustrated I became that I wasn't getting everything else done. Okay, and this is hard to admit, okay? It's hard to admit, right? Because we feel bad when we when we admit things like this. Okay? But I think that many parents understand this feeling. Okay? I've seen it a lot. And it's not because we don't love our children, okay? It's not because we don't want to support them, but because our nervous systems have been conditioned to measure success through accomplishment. Okay, so there were days when I spent hours helping my son feel safe, hours, right? You can relate to this, I'm sure. Hours of co regulating, accommodating, supporting him through overwhelm. And somehow at the end of those days, I still felt like I had done nothing, right? Okay, because my nervous system didn't count those things at the end of the day. Okay, what it counted was whether the laundry or dishes got done and if the house was clean and organized, whether I had answered the emails or how much work I had gotten done or hadn't gotten done, whether I crossed things off the list, right? Helping my son feel safe didn't register as success. Staying connected during a hard moment didn't register as success. Supporting him through a nervous system storm didn't register as success. Okay, my nervous system only counted productivity the way we have all been conditioned to measure it. Okay, and then my son reached burnout and stopped going to school. Okay, and then the cracks in my survival system, this productivity, survival pattern became impossible to ignore. Okay. The productivity that had once helped me feel okay started to completely disappear. My days no longer revolved around work, activity, errands, and accomplishments. More and more of my time became devoted to helping him feel safe, helping him recover, helping him navigate a world that had become too overwhelming for his nervous system. Okay, at the same time, I was burning out too. Okay, and suddenly I found myself in a situation where my mind was still demanding productivity while my body had less and less capacity to provide it. Okay. The things that once made me feel successful were no longer available in the same way. So I was working less, doing less, accomplishing less. And yet, I was working harder than I ever have before. Okay. Can you relate? Right? If you left work to stay home to take care of your child. Okay, my days were filled with supporting a child who was struggling, managing nervous system storms, co-regulating, researching, accommodating, trying to make it through the day with all the basic needs being met. Yet somehow my brain kept repeating the same message. Okay, you got nothing done today, you're failing. Yeah, that was the inner critic in my brain, right? The harder I worked to support my son, the more I felt like I was failing. And the more I spent time helping him, the less productive I felt in life. And the less productive I felt, the more shame I carried that somehow I was the only one who couldn't do it all. Okay, when my son's productivity ventured into the negative, right, because he stopped doing much of anything, then this hit even harder. Not only did I feel like I wasn't doing enough for the household or my business, I felt like I wasn't doing enough to get him to be more productive too. Okay, because my nervous system wasn't only measuring me through productivity, it was measuring him through it too. And eventually I began to realize that this wasn't actually a productivity problem, it was a self-worth problem. Okay, because I had spent decades believing that productivity was how I earned enoughness. Okay, it was how I measured whether I was successful, a successful human being. And now that strategy, which may have worked for me in the past, was no longer working with the life I had today with my son. Okay, for a long time, I felt like my son was breaking me down, like I was losing myself, like I was failing at life, like we were all failing at life. But little did I know that he was not breaking me down. He was helping to break open an old belief, an old survival pattern. Okay, the belief that I had to keep doing, achieving, accomplishing, and staying productive in order to be and feel worthy and enough. And when I began to see that, a door opened. Okay, a door to a different way of living, a different way of measuring success, a different way of relating to myself. Okay, one that wasn't built on proving, striving, and constantly doing, but on presence and connection and safety and being. And looking back now, I can see that my son wasn't taking me away from myself. Okay, he was helping me come home to who I truly was. And that has become one of the greatest gifts that he has ever given me. Okay, so let's just talk a little bit about this invisible rule of, productivity, needing to be productive to be successful in life that is running so many of our lives, right? Because this is what I see in so many parents, right? They're burnt out, they're trying to do it all for their kids, and they're wanting so badly to be more regulated and present and safe for their kids, but unable to really detach from this programming of doing more to be enough, right? So I even see it in the questions they ask me, right? They always come to you, what should I do, right? What should I do when my child refuses school? What should I do when they're dysregulated? What should I do when they won't listen? What should I do when they become aggressive? What should I do when they are anxious? What should I do when I feel overwhelmed? Okay, notice how quickly it's about doing. It's always about doing. What should I do? What should I do? Like that's a fight, flight, sympathetic mode survival system. Okay. Most of us have been conditioned to believe that if we can just find the right strategy, the right tool, the right intervention, the right plan, we will finally feel better and won't have to feel this way. Okay. Our culture worships productivity. We need to understand this deep conditioning, right? So we celebrate busyness. We admire people who can do it all. We glorify the hustle. We treat exhaustion as evidence that we are working hard enough. And whether we realize it or not, many of us absorb these messages very early in life. Okay, good grades get praised, achievement gets rewarded, accomplishments get noticed. Being helpful gets approval. Pushing through gets celebrated. Okay, over time, the nervous system begins to make meaning that if achievement leads to approval, and approval leads to belonging and love, right? Then achievement must equal safety. And eventually, the beliefs that come deeply wedged in us, in our nervous systems, okay, are if I am productive, I am worthy. If I am productive, I belong and I'm lovable too. If I am productive, I am safe. Okay. And when a belief becomes tied to safety, it stops feeling like a belief. It feels like truth. This is why so many parents feel so much shame when they cannot get things done. Okay. It isn't really about the dishes or the laundry or the to-do list. Okay. The undone task is simply activating something much deeper. It is activating the fear that says, if I can't keep up, maybe I am failing. Okay. If I am failing, maybe I am not enough. Okay. And that is a very painful place to live because we are trying to feel worthy and enough by how much we do and get done versus how much we can be present and stay in connection and be there for another, right? It's kind of backwards, in my opinion. So let's get into this a little bit more, right? How parenting a high needs child, especially a high needs child, okay, why it really breaks down this productivity strategy. Okay. Okay, so this it's very destabilizing, right? Because it breaks parenting a high needs child, they need more of us, right? So it really starts to break down this primal survival strategy because we can't spend more time, getting things done to feel enough and worthy, right? But yet it's a survival strategy and we feel like we need it to feel enough and worthy. Okay? And then parenting, right? It can often feel like a thankless job. I hear that from all parents, okay? But and then with our high needs kids, it becomes even harder to feel the rewards of parenting because they often don't show, they don't follow the developmental timelines, the expectations, or productivity-based milestones that our brain has become conditioned to expect. Okay. And their needs don't fit neatly into schedules, timelines, expectation, or productivity systems, right? There's canceled plans left, right, and center. Okay. The second challenge is that they need so much more of us. Okay. More presence, more flexibility, more co regulation, more nervous system energy, more time, and productivity may have helped us feel better about ourselves in the past. But now this strategy for feeling capable enough starts breaking down because no matter how hard we work, it can feel like we can never keep up. Okay. Like you finally sit down to answer a few emails and then your child needs you again, right? You start cleaning the kitchen and a meltdown happens or they spill something else because they're dysregulated. Okay. You spend the afternoon helping your child recover from overwhelm and realize you haven't accomplished anything else on your list. Okay. You finally get an hour to yourself, but you're so exhausted that you don't even know where to begin. Right. So slowly, many parents begin feeling like they are failing at everything. And it's not because you are, okay? It's because you're using the wrong measuring stick. Okay. The reality is that parenting a high needs child requires an extraordinary amount of invisible labor, right? It's invisible to others, to even our own brain. Okay, you can spend hours helping your child move through anxiety, frustration, overwhelm, dysregulation, and you could spend weeks building trust, safety, and months accommodating needs, reducing demands, helping their nervous system recover from chronic stress, right? But unlike most areas of life, the effort you put in doesn't always lead to quick or visible results, right? It's not like, oh, I cleaned up the kitchen and I feel like, oh, there, I have a visible result, right? It can take months or years with our kids to see the effects of our labor, okay, our hard work that we put into them, okay? And so when your child continues to struggle despite everything you're doing, it can start to feel like nothing works or you're failing as a parent too, okay? And yet at the end of all that work, right, there may be nothing tangible to point to, right? No completed project, no crossed off task, no measurable outcome to see, just a child who feels a little bit safer, a little calmer, a little more connected maybe, but that's even up and down, right? For a while. But if your nervous system has been conditioned to measure success through productivity, then those things may not register as accomplishments. Okay, that's one of the challenges, right? Because that creates so much suffering. You can't see that what you're doing is like a measure of success. You're working harder than ever before, yet feeling less successful than ever before. Okay, you can no longer rely on productivity in the old way to feel successful, and you often can't yet see the results of your parenting efforts either. So then the nervous system starts looking even harder for evidence that you are enough. And often it turns right back to the to-do list, right? We go right back into the old habit of I need to do my to-do list to feel enough again. Okay, so I just want to take a moment to understand why productivity feels so good, because this is important to understand, right? Productivity is not necessarily a bad thing, right? Um, and productivity is not just wasn't just about helping me get things done. Okay, it was about helping me feel okay. So I've talked about that to some degree, right? But productivity, like it gives us this sense of certainty and it gives us this sense of control. Okay, it gives us clear outcomes. It gives us evidence that our effort led to something. It gives us little hits of accomplishment, which gives us those dopamine hits. It gives us something very tangible to point to and say, I did that. I finished that. I accomplished something today. Okay, in many areas of life, effort and results are fairly connected, right? You clean the house and the house looks cleaner. You answer emails, your inbox shrinks. You work and get paid. You finish a project, you can see the outcome. But parenting a high needs child is often the exact opposite. Okay, so this is why we cling to productivity like our life depends on it, because we are not getting these same reward hits in parenting. Because parenting a high needs child is what? It's filled with uncertainty, the rewards are delayed, the progress is often invisible, there's no clear finish line. Okay, so you can spend months accommodating, co-regulating, building trust, helping your child's nervous system feel safer, and still wonder if anything is changing. Okay, and sometimes progress takes years. Sometimes things appear to get harder before they get better. And because the work is so invisible, it can be incredibly hard for the nervous system to register it as success. So I think this is one of the reasons why so many of us keep running back to productivity and that to-do list. Okay, not because we are shallow, not because we care more about the tasks than we do our own children, but because productivity is one of the few places left where our effort still feels measurable, right? Where we're getting that reward hit, okay? That quick sense of accomplishment and feeling successful, okay? And when our parenting life, right, feels more uncertain, overwhelming, filled with delayed rewards, then that pull of productivity becomes even stronger, right? We cling to it to get those rewards. Okay, the nervous system is searching for evidence that I am okay, I am successful, right? We are enough. Okay, but the problem is that no matter how many things we cross off the list, the feeling never lasts for long. Okay, it's short-lived. There's always going to be more to do and more to get done. And so, like, we're on that hamster wheel, right? And so the to-do list can never really truly solve the deeper problem, okay? Because what we are actually looking for is not productivity, it's that feeling of enoughness. That's what's giving us the reward hit, the dopamine hit. It's that feeling of enoughness, okay? So what if we could just feel enough, right? Every day for all that we do, just as we are. Then we could get that reward hit and not cling to productivity as the survival strategy to get it. Okay. And then I want to mention about how productivity becomes a better child too, because I think that that's really important. Okay. To understand. And I think we all see that, right? If we live through this lens of we are enough if we're productive, we are going to see our child that way. Right. So, um, then it affects how we react to our child as well. Okay. So if your child struggles with productivity, they stop going to school like my son did, right? What happens when they cannot meet expectations and they cannot push through? What happens when they need accommodations and they move at a different pace than the world expects? Okay, many of the fears we carry for our children are real, but some of them are also connected to our own conditioning. Okay, and I know that this was true for me, and this is true for many of the parents I work with. So when my son stopped going to school, I wasn't only worried about his well-being, right? I was worried about his future. Like, would he be successful, independent, able to function in the world? Would he be okay? And underneath all of those questions was another one that I couldn't see at the time. Okay. What if he isn't productive enough? Right? Because if productivity equals worth, then a child who struggles with productivity can feel terrifying, right? To my own nervous system. And it's not because we don't love them and we don't accept them, but because their struggles activate the same wounds that we carry ourselves, right? The wound that says, to be enough, you must accomplish. To be enough, you must perform. To be enough, you must produce. Okay, so this is deeply wedged into us and why we react to our kids so much. Okay, but it's also why parenting our kids can help become this profoundly healing journey, because they challenge so many of these beliefs, right? These survival patterns that we've built our lives around that are not serving any of us anymore, right? They force us to ask questions that we may have never asked otherwise. That what if productivity isn't the measure of worth? What if success isn't what I thought it was? Okay, what if enoughness has nothing to do with accomplishment? Okay, these are uncomfortable questions, but they are also incredibly freeing ones, because once we begin asking them, another possibility starts to emerge. Okay, that maybe the goal in life isn't to be more productive. Maybe it's more about becoming more present. Maybe the goal isn't to earn enoughness. Maybe the goal is to discover that it was there all along without us having to do anything, and just for us being who we are, just as we are, right? We are enough for just existing. Yeah, that's a tough one. It's a tough one. Okay. So this brings me into talking about our values, right? Because we're living this mismatch. Okay. Every parent comes to me saying, like, when I ask them, what's most important to you? Okay. They say connection, love, presence, kindness, compassion, acceptance, safety, relationship. Okay. When we get down to the core of all the things that are important to them, and then go deeper into that, into what is that really telling you that you want most in life, these are the things. Okay. But we're not living in congruence and aligned with those values. Okay. So very few parents say that their values are productivity, efficiency, achievement, and accomplishment. Okay. Of course, we want our kids to be the best that they can be in life, right? And find what makes them happy. Okay. But when we look at closely at how we're actually living, there is this big disconnect between what we say we value and what our nervous system has been trained to prioritize. Okay, so we can think of this. There's this famous analogy. I think it's Stephen Covey who came up with this, but don't quote me on that one. But it's the big rocks and little rocks analogy. And I can't remember because it's over 20 years ago I read about this. Okay, so imagine you have a jar, okay, and you have these big rocks and you have these little rocks, okay? And the big rocks are the things that matter most, right? That every day I showed up with connection and love and presence and regulation and helping my child feel safe and prioritizing health and mental well-being and staying in relationship. Okay. So those are your big rocks, right? Let's say those are your big rocks. Okay. Then you have these little rocks that are everything else. Okay. The laundry, the email, the dishes, the appointments, the errands, the housework, the schedules, and even work. Okay. Can be certain tasks of work can be little rocks, right? And the little rocks, they matter too. I'm not saying they don't matter. It's not about pretending responsibilities don't exist, right? We all live in the real world, and some of our days was going to be taken up with a lot of these little rocks, okay? But we've reversed the order of prioritizing what's most important, right? We spend our lives putting all those little rocks in the jar first, Okay, we spend our days trying to get everything done, trying to catch up, trying to stay on top of things, trying to feel successful, trying to earn enoughness by getting all those little rocks in. Okay, and then even if there's time left over, then we give it to the big rocks. And by then, like, the big rocks cannot fit in the jar, my friends. The big rocks cannot fit in because all the little rocks have taken up the jar. Okay. So, for example, like we tell ourselves, oh, I'll relax when everything is done. I'll be present when I finish this. I'll spend quality time with my family when I catch up on everything else. I'll take care of myself when things settle down. Okay. But the little rocks never stop coming. Okay. There's always another email, another load of laundry, another appointment, another thing that needs attention. Okay. And so many parents find themselves living years of their lives waiting for a moment that never arrives, right? A moment where that everything feels done, they can finally relax, they can finally feel enough, and then they can prioritize the big rocks, right? And also, like, at the end of the day, you're not sitting there going, oh, did I like prioritize the big rocks today? You know, like you managed all these big rocks with your child, but at the end of the day, you're not saying, okay, I put all the big rocks in first, and sure, the little rocks, you know, didn't get done enough, but I at least, like, I'm connecting to my values and living through my values. Okay, we don't do that, right? So so this is the thing that we need to switch, okay? Um, because what what we need to help our systems to recognize is that the enoughness comes more from living according to our values, right? And showing up according to our values. It doesn't come from those little rocks. Okay, it doesn't come from enoughness doesn't come from something we earn either. Okay, enoughness comes from who we already are, just for being who we are. And all we need to do is tune into it and reconnect to it. Okay, so that's the other thing about enoughness. Okay, so the truth is that I didn't break free from this overnight. Okay, I still notice these patterns in myself. I still notice the pull toward productivity when the old wound of not enough gets triggered. Okay, but there were a few shifts that began changing everything. So let's get into that next. Okay, so in order to change this, okay, here are the shifts that I had to make. Okay. So first I had to start counting different things as success, right? Like just what I just talked about, the big rocks versus the little rocks, connecting to the values. Okay. So one of the biggest realizations I had was that I was doing meaningful work all day long. I just wasn't noticing it. My brain wasn't noticing it. My brain wasn't counting it. It wasn't taking it in as accomplishment so that it could nourish me and give me that sense of fulfillment and give me that dopamine hit to keep going, right? That reward hit. I had to actively help my brain notice every day that helping my son feel safe and co-regulating him and accommodating him and supporting his nervous system and building trust with him was worthy work. Okay. So creating safety was the most worthy work of all because it would leave a lasting imprint on his nervous system and the generations that follow, right? And I've seen this, like I put 6 years into doing so much of this work for my son, and only now, like it took a long time, but so I'm seeing all the rewards come out now, finally, you know, when he's 17. Okay. Okay, so what did I do? Okay, so I started counting different things as success. Okay, so that's the practice. But how did I do it? I would use havening, okay, which is a psychosensory modality that uses touch. So I would use touch on my system to help calm my amygdala in my brain, to help me take in, calm my nervous system and help me take in all the wonderful things I had done that day that were worthy, okay, and that was worthy work, and allowing myself to feel fulfillment of them. Okay, so you could think of this as also like a gratitude practice that you could do every day, or a practice every day where you just, before you go to sleep at night, you know, notice all the ways that you showed up and connect and was able to do all these things for your child and how that was worthy work, right? These are the things that feel invisible to our brains, okay? We did not learn how valuable this kind of work is or how deeply it changes families, generations, and the world around us. So we need to help our brain to see that. Okay, so instead of constantly ending my days feeling like I had failed, I began ending my days noticing how hard I had worked and how I was living according to my values by prioritizing the big rocks too. Okay. The second thing is I had to redefine success. Okay. I realized that I was measuring my life using a definition of success that no longer fit the life I was living, right? My old definition was built around productivity, accomplishment, achievement, and getting things done. But life I had with my son required something different, okay, and slowly led me toward a definition of success that was more aligned with my values, okay? So the new definition of success became more about how present was I today? How connected, right? How regulated, staying in relationship, prioritizing safety, showing up with love and kindness for both myself and my son. Okay. So even moments where I lost my patience, could I show up with love and kindness for myself instead of going to old survival patterns? Okay. So instead of the question asking myself every day, how much did I get done today, and checking my to-do list and then measuring my worthiness and enoughness by that, it was more about, okay, how much was I present today? Or how much did I come back to presence as much as I could? Okay. How much did I show up with love and safety first? Okay. And that's where I really started to help my brain to orient to this new definition and start to see all the ways that I was, be worthy and enough. Okay. So the third thing is I had to let go of my attachment to the to-do list, like that, to make me feel enough. Okay. This one was hard. I laugh because it's a hard one. It's so deeply ingrained in us. Okay. For years, okay, getting things done was my go-to survival strategy, right? And just like you, I believe that if I could get enough done, I'd finally feel okay, successful, loved, connected enough, and avoid the pain of feeling not enough, especially in my parenting journey. Okay. But it never lasted. I was back on the hamster wheel again, chasing enoughness. So I worked on helping the parts of me that didn't feel enough to begin letting go of those beliefs, right? So I did some trauma reprocessing work around that, worked with my parts, right? And I stepped into allowing myself to be just as I am. Okay. I started feeling into the possibility of what if I'm enough just as I am, right? And I allowed that feeling to nourish me instead. Okay. Because there's a lot of relief that comes from accepting yourself and loving yourself as you are without needing to do anything to earn that love, right? I would look at that to-do list and I would hear, I should be doing this, I should be doing that. And then I would remember that that should is based on some conditioning I took on, some program I took on that I need to get things done to be enough. And it was really about letting go of that and stepping into can I accept, love, and accept myself just as I am for doing nothing? And then sit with the relief of that and sit with, the inner love for myself with that. Okay. It's not an easy one, but it's such an important one and it's very freeing. Okay. And then the fourth thing is I had to learn how to be and not just do. Okay. Presence, right? This was one of the greatest lessons my son was trying to teach me. And honestly, like it's still an ongoing practice for me, right? As I think of the things that I need to get done for work and stuff. And then I come back to the present. So it's an ongoing practice, right? The mind takes you away, you come back and you come back to the present, right? So learning how to be can feel surprisingly uncomfortable when your nervous system has spent years focused on doing. So it can take some time to practice this, right? How do I simply be present without thinking about what comes next? How do I stay here instead of jumping into the future or replaying the past, right? So I started practicing this on walks in the forest first, okay? Then I practiced it with my son. So like in the forest, I would walk and my mind would drift and then I'd come back to the present and noticing the things around me, noticing my body in the present, right? And then with my son, When my mind drifted to all the things that needed to be done or cleaned, I would gently notice it and come back to the present moment to be with him, be in my body, and be here. Okay. And one of the biggest surprises was realizing how much fulfillment was already available when I was truly present. Okay. So I would feel fulfilled by being truly present at the end of the day. And I would definitely feel way less tired. Okay, so I began noticing the little moments of connection with my son when I was present and letting them nourish me. I began seeing more of the good that was already here instead of always focusing on what was missing or what still needed fixing, right? I learned how to stay with the harder parts too. Like as you become more present in being, right, then you feel more emotion too, right? So there can be grief there sometimes, fear, frustration, uncertainty and all these sensations that come with it. So I learned to be with that, right? Tolerate being with that, comfort that. And over time, I realized that presence was giving me something that productivity never could. Okay, not a temporary feeling of accomplishment, but a deeper sense of connection, peace, fulfillment, and enoughness because I could feel like I was enough in the present just as I was. Okay. So that is the practice and that is the gift. Okay. And when I look back now, I see something I couldn't see then, right? My son, he wasn't interrupting my productivity like many of us feel, right? He was interrupting a survival strategy. Every time he pulled me back into the present moment, every time he noticed when my attention drifted away, every time he demanded more presence than productivity, every time he challenged my timelines and expectations and plans, he was inviting me into something that my nervous system had never fully learned, which is how to simply be, right? Human being instead of human doing. Yeah, to simply just be, okay? And I want to say this doesn't mean I've mastered this lesson, okay? I still notice my mind wandering to race ahead, right? I still notice myself reaching for productivity when I feel anxious about getting things done in a certain timeline. I still notice the old belief showing up, right? The belief that says if you can just get more done, you'll finally feel okay. Okay, but now I recognize it. I understand what it is really looking for. It isn't looking for productivity. It is looking for enoughness. Okay. And I am learning over and over again that enoughness was never waiting at the bottom of a completed to-do list. It was never hiding inside a perfectly clean house. And it was never attached to how much I accomplished. It was never dependent on how productive my child was. If enoughness was here all along, beneath the striving, beneath the pressure, beneath the expectations, beneath the shame, waiting for me to stop long enough to notice it. So if you're a parent who feels like you never get enough done, okay, if you feel exhausted by the constant pressure to keep up, if you feel guilty when you rest, if you feel like you're failing because your life doesn't look the way you thought it would, I want you to know something. You are not failing. You are not behind. You are not lazy. You are not broken. You are caring far more than most people can see. And perhaps the work is not to become more productive. Okay, perhaps the work is to become more present. Okay, to grieve what has been lost, the old identity that is attached to productivity, to let go of old definitions of success, and to reconnect what truly matters, right? To remember that helping a child feel safe is meaningful work that can be fulfilling to both of you. And to remember that connection matters, that regulation matters, that love matters, that presence matters. And to remember that neither your worth nor your child's worth has ever depended on productivity. You are enough. Your child is enough. Not when the list is finished, not when life gets easier, not when everything finally falls into place. Right now, you and your child are enough exactly as you are. So if that spoke to you, if that helped you in any way, please comment. I love to read your comments. Please share with others. Please like and follow. Thank you for being here.